an unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is really encountered even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure today to welcome a guest teacher, first time speaking with us, and that's Tomon Lisa Mar, who is my Dharma niece. Her teacher, Tonin O'Connor, who was going to come, I don't know if she's made it here yet, is my Dharma sister. We're both Tozen.
I am here. I am the teacher.
There you are, Tonin. Wonderful to see you.
Hello.
Checking in from Milwaukee. So Tomon is a palliative care physician as well as a Zen teacher. She was a primary care physician until she encountered Buddhism and caring for the dying at the same moment. And so these two became I think the twin poles of her professional life. And she continued her training. She trained under Tonin and received transmission from her some few years back, and lives now in Albuquerque. Tomon and her husband, Joe, moved to Albuquerque so that she could develop a palliative care program at the University of New Mexico Hospital in Albuquerque, developing a collaborative team. And while doing that, she had found time to continue with her Zen practice and some teaching, and also to make art. Right now, Tomon is illustrating a book on Ryokan by Shohaku Okamura, which will be published soon. So with that, welcome Tomon Lisa Mar to Stone Creek. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Jisho. It's really wonderful to see you and everybody. I've talked to several folks. And I was going to say that too. Tonin is I'm a disciple of Tonin O'Connor, who was a student of and disciple of Tozen Akiyama, and that Jisho was also a disciple. And so basically I'm your niece or you're my aunt, Jisho. And I was just going to say, nice to see you, Auntie. So, and thank you very much for welcoming me to talk today. What I wanted to chat about was, I have been very, very fortunate to have such a wonderful teacher as Tonin, who, when I moved out here to start this program, she and I and another Zen Center member named Jim Gother have actually had a Sunday morning call for an hour and a half, sometimes longer, studying a Buddhist text for about 13 years now. And that has been a true gift, because there is isn't a Soto Zen Center out here. So I still consider, Milwaukee Zen Center my place. And yet I'm in these sort of dual worlds with being a palliative care physician at the University of New Mexico, which is a very interesting place to work because it's a safety net hospital, and it's been an experience through COVID, but I know it's been an experience through COVID for many people. So today I wanted to talk about grief and loss. I called my talk Grief, Impermanence, and Fellow Suffering Beings. And talk about a Buddhist story that I think can be helpful to those who are grieving. Buddhism teaches about lack of attachment and impermanence. And so sometimes people falsely believe that if you're studying and practicing Buddhism, you might have some sort of buffer to loss. Those concepts are obviously extremely important, but it doesn't mean that when someone you love dies, that you don't hurt or grieve. And Tonin had told a story about a Zen master whose son had died. And as he wept at the funeral, his disciple remonstrated him, saying, "Why are you crying? Surely as a Zen master, you know everything is impermanent." And the Zen master replied, "Yes, but he was my son. And so it doesn't buffer us from the hurt and loss when someone we love has passed. And I remember when I was participating in a class at the Milwaukee Zen Center before I left, and we had a visit from a Buddhist scholar from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And she was interested in approaches to grief and loss in different Buddhist cultures around the world. She talked about visiting Thailand, and after it was sort of the sequence of it was after there had been a devastating tsunami. And when she asked how people were doing, how they were coping, she heard time after time the same answer, which was Patakara is bereft of all her family. When she would say, how are you doing? They would say, Patakara is bereft of all her family, which led her to look at that story and understand what they were trying to tell her. Many of you may know the story of Patakara. I think it's in the Pali Canon. It's an ancient text. And I'll shorten it a little bit here because it is a long story, but Patakara was this very beautiful woman who lived in Savatthi during the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, and she was from a very wealthy family. She fell in love, though, with one of the household servants, which wasn't cool with her family. And she eloped with him and then sort of ran off to live a distance away. But when she became pregnant, she felt a strong desire to go back home and be in her family home to give birth. So her husband was like, I don't think that's a great idea because they may not like me coming back, you know? So one day when he was off doing something, off she went, you know, she's like, I'm going back home. So she's heading home. And then her husband caught up with her eventually, and she was very close to gave birth in the forest. And then they went back home to their home with the newborn baby. And then several years later, she became pregnant again. And so she's like to her husband, hey, I want to go back home. I want to be with my family. And he's like, no, they're going to do something awful to me. And so when he was not there, she went off with her young son in tow to go back to her parents' home. But her husband did catch up with her again, but it was by that time pouring rain. And so he said, look, you're very close to giving birth. Let me clear a spot in the woods here so that you can give birth. And he walked and found a suitable spot, but while he was clearing that spot, a poisonous snake bit him and he died. And so off a bit away, Patakara gave birth to her second child, and then in the morning went to find him and found that he had died. And she was overcome with guilt. You know, he wouldn't have been here if I hadn't dragged him out here. And she was, just sort of sick with grief. So she thought, okay, so I'm just going to keep going now to my parents' home because I don't know what else to do. So she goes down, has to cross a river, which is normally a very shallow. And with the rain that has come, it's a torrential, really strong current. And she looks at it and she's got a newborn and she's got a toddler. And she's like, I can't do both of these at the same time and be safe. So she leaves her toddler on the one shore, and then she takes her newborn, makes it across the river and leaves the newborn on the other shore, and then goes back across the river to get her young son. But when she's in the middle of the river, suddenly she sees a hawk that swoops down and grabs her infant child and takes it away. And she is screaming to the hawk to get away, drop the baby. And her young son, who hears her, thinks she's calling to him. And he goes into the river to try to reach her, and he gets swept away. So at this point, she's lost her husband, and she's lost her 2 children, and she's overwhelmed with grief, and she doesn't know what to do, so she continues on towards her family home. On the way, she meets a man from Savatthi, where she was from, where her parents lived, and asks about her family that's there. And they say to her, he says to her, I'm really sorry, but a huge storm came and knocked your parents' house down, and both your parents and your brother have died, and you might be able to look up there. They're in a funeral pyre now, and there's smoke coming up. So she had lost, in the span of a day, her husband, her 2 children, her parents, and her brother. And at that point, she lost it. You know, the grief was so profound and overwhelming. She couldn't handle it. She ripped off her clothes. She was screaming and crying, mumbling uncontrollably, and stumbled along on the path towards Savatthi. And, you know, it was everything that had given her life meaning, everything that had defined her as a person, everything was gone, and the ground literally had dropped out from under her. There was no north or south or east or west. She didn't know where she was. She was so consumed with grief. At that time, it just so happened that the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, was teaching in the village of Savatthi. And he you know, through his powers, was able to see her in the distance. She's naked, she's screaming, she's mumbling, and he sort of tells her, you know, come here, come here. And when she tries to get into the group that he's teaching to, they start throwing stones at her. They're like, get away, you crazy mad woman. Like, go away, go away. And then he said, no, let her in, let her in. And because he could see her suffering, he could see that this was someone who was profoundly suffering. And he called her up to him and gently said, you know, let's try to calm down. What's your name? And she gave her name as Patakara, which actually wasn't her name. Patakara means mad, naked woman. And she didn't want to give her real name, which actually meant beautiful one. So she gave this name of Patakara. And he said, sit down. He was very gentle. And he said, try to calm yourself. And then she sort of understood, oh my gosh, here I am in front of this crowd and I have nothing on. And someone in the Sangha gave her a piece of cloth to cover herself. And other women that were there helped to clean her up. And then she told the Buddha, I have lost my husband, my 2 children, my parents, and I've lost my only brother. So let me just move this a little bit. Okay. So the Buddha consoled her at that point and said, Patakara, have no fear. You have come now to one who can protect you and really guide you. I mean, what a beautiful thing to hear when your whole world has dropped out. He said, throughout this round of existence or samsara, the amount of tears you have shed on account of the death of sons and husbands and parents and brothers is voluminous. Then the Buddha expounded to her the Anamatagga Sutra, which dealt with countless existences, and she felt relieved and calmed. That sutra, and by the way, Anamatagga means the unknowable beginning, is where the Buddha asks a group of monks, what do you think, monks? What is more, the stream you have shed as you roamed and wandered on in this journey, crying and weeping because of being united with unfriendly people and unpleasant things and separated from loved ones and loved belongings, this or the water in the 4 oceans? And then they correctly answered, these tears that we have all shed. And he said, what's the reason for that? It's because, monks, this cycle of rebirth is endless. The beginning of this extremely long journey cannot be discovered. Those beings, hindered by lack of knowledge and true nature of life and bound by craving, roam and wander on in this endless journey, without end, endless journey. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced various types of suffering and tragedy and disaster. You've filled the cemetery with your dead bodies. Therefore, monks, the time has come for you to understand the meaningless nature of all conditioned beings. The time has come for you to become detached from them, and the time has come for you to be liberated by them. So the Buddha taught her that sutra and then said to her not to worry too much about those who were gone, but to purify yourself and strive and realize nirvana. On hearing the discourse, Patakara realized the uncertainty and futility of existence and impermanence and became established on the path to lead her out of samsara, to liberate her from samsara. And she became a bhikkhuni, an ordained person, and then an arhat, and eventually got to be known as the keeper of the Vinaya because of her dedication to practice and knowledge and to the Buddhist way. And then the Buddha spoke a verse. He said, better than 100 years in the life of a person who does not perceive the arising and dissolving of the five aggregates or skandhas is a day in the life of one who perceives the arising and dissolving of the five aggregates. So what were the Thai survivors of that tsunami telling the Buddhist scholar? They were saying that they had lost people they loved. They were grieving, just like Patakara, that they had learned from Buddhism about impermanence and knew that loss was part of life. They were coping the best they could in the face of such a horrible loss. And they also understood that everyone suffers. And even though they were grieving, they possibly found some solace in the story of a fellow sufferer, Patakara. It was likely their shorthanded way of saying these things. So one part of that story that always really resonated with me when I first heard it was how the Sangha didn't want her to come into the group. But the Buddha was able to see her suffering and let her in. You know, the Sangha, and I read in a medical journal, actually, there's a medical journal from India where it says this is the first time in history that mental illness is not considered a bad thing. Like the Buddha goes, I see you're mentally ill right now, come on in, because we're going to help you. Maybe the Sangha, though, didn't want this screaming woman, naked woman, to interrupt their practice. And maybe they were afraid of her, which could be. But they also might not have thought that the Buddha, should see this woman because he's so refined. I mean, he's the Buddha and, all that sort of thing. So, but the Buddha was so kind. He saw her suffering and he said, I'm going to try to alleviate it. I'm not going to exclude you. And what a wonderful message, I think, for all of us, not to judge people, even when they're at their worst, even at their lowest points, but see them as suffering and work to alleviate their suffering. And that's our vow. That's our bodhisattva vow. And I think about the quote that the Dalai Lama once said. Someone asked him, they said, you meet people from all walks of life, poor, homeless people, with prime ministers, kings and queens, and how do you connect with them all? Because you seem to have this amazing ability to connect with everyone you see. And he said very simply, when I meet someone, I see someone who doesn't want to suffer. And I don't want to suffer either. And so right there, we have that connection. So to see each other as fellow suffering beings. How can that story this story or these stories be helpful to us? The world obviously is going through tremendous change and challenge with climate change, with the COVID pandemic, understanding and trying to change the inequities and injustice that is all around us and embedded in our society. Many, many, many things are going on. But if we can remember that everything is impermanent and that everything is interdependent, we need each other. And we need to get beyond our judgments, preconceptions, preferences, and expectations and help those in need. So we listen to someone when they tell their story without judgment. We let them tell their story. We see clearly what's going on as best we can, keep cleaning our lenses, and then try to act in the best way that we can. See clearly and then act. We are open to surprise. I love being surprised when I sometimes form some idea in my head about something and then I turn out to be completely wrong. I'm always thrilled with that. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the ground falls out, there are people there to help you, which I think is a beautiful thing. And so I'll end with a quote from Mr. Rogers. You may know Mr. Rogers, but he said, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mom would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. So that's my talk today. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for asking me to come speak. And I'm very interested in people's thoughts about those stories.
So as everyone who's a regular here knows, we don't have a formal system. Just speak up or raise your hand and say something to Tomon. Ask a question, make a comment. Thank you.
And if I don't know the answer, fortunately, I have my teacher here as well. So.
Hopefully that may not help.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, any thoughts or questions or comments?
Lisa, this is Annette. I had wanted to get a note off to you. I met you a few years ago in Oregon.
Yes.
One of the only Buddhist conferences I went to, and I remember sitting with you and laughing with you and feeling a good connection. So pleased to see you and hear from you.
Likewise, yeah.
And I, in the spirit of being open to the suffering and to each person, we have a circumstance where we're located in just a little town in Grayton, where there are many homeless that surround us and people just getting by with minimal and with fortunate to have trailers over their heads or roofs. And how do we welcome someone? How do we welcome people and not feel threatened by the magnitude of their need? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because a colleague of mine in palliative care calls it the gaping jaws of unmet need. You know, there's so much to do, but I think that possibly by going to people and talking with them, I mean, they're human beings. Who knows what their background is? They may have been high on the ladder and now are low on the ladder. They may have always been, you know, in the social construct that we have. I remember, I'll tell you, I learned a lot, and I'm going to keep saying from Tonin. Tonin did a lot of prison outreach and did and still does, and you know, kind of goes out to the prisons and it took me once, you know, which was a really, really great experience. But I remember when some of those folks would come back into the Sangha, you know, they would seek her out and come in and sometimes, you know, people had mental illness. Sometimes people had just been released from a long period of incarceration. I just saw how people treated them like people. and we had I don't know if you remember this, Tonin, but one man who came in, we had just finished our orioki, and he came in and he sat down kind of in the middle of the whole group. And we had all just finished, and it was like, let's get him something to eat. And so, the Tenzo at that time went and got him some food and brought it to him, and he sat there. And then Tony's like, well, why don't you come over here, and kind of sit down. And it was just like such a beautiful, not a big thing, just to try to be present and open, to listen to people. And I think seeing people as human beings and not different from us. It's a circumstance. It's sometimes one thing that throws people out of their current life. I mean, like Patakara with her, within 24 hours, everything happens, right? And so then also trying to work systemically to try to change why we have this situation, to talking to government officials, writing letters, advocating for people. I guess we do our best, and I think that's what we can do. And maybe as a collective group, put our heads together and think, okay, what do we want to work on right now? What's really so distressing, and get the wisdom of the group, because the group has the wisdom, right? Not one person, not even just the teacher, but the whole group, and just try your best. I'm sorry to hear that's happening out there. I've heard about it in Santa Rosa, where a good friend of mine lives, and it's a very difficult situation. I don't know, if you have thoughts too, Annette, what you think.
Well, I appreciate the encouragement of working as a group and feeling strong enough to meet someone one-on-one too.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping it alive as opposed to feeling an aversion. And
Right. Yeah, I mean, we sort of spend our lives ricocheting back and forth, things we like and things we don't like, and we just sort of like, I always think of it like a bobsled in the Winter Olympics, like boom, 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 we go back and forth, and yeah, to kind of meet people without preconception or expectation. And I wasn't going to get all into my medical stuff, but I'll just say that the guy who started palliative care, I saw him once at a conference. He's in Canada, and this was early when I was doing palliative care, and I saw him he does this every 2 years for like 40 years now, and he's sort of a rock star in palliative care. So like people would see him like walking he's trying to get to the next talk, but no one's letting him, because like everybody's like running up to him and like, oh, there he is. And I've never seen somebody beat on a person individually, listen intently, and be compassionate. And then he would go on, and then someone else would run up to him. And I thought that, I learned more from him at that moment. I don't need to know him, and I don't need to whatever, but I saw this beaded attention, which to me was so beautiful. Like that's the greatest gift you can give someone, because people were all like flustered, like, oh my God, there he is, and he was like, no, I'm not going to let that. He's like, tell me what about this and that? And I think we just try to listen and hear what people's stories are. And actually, I found, like in palliative care, listening to people's stories is the greatest gift, because we might not be able to fix stuff, but we see them as a fellow human being and respect them, so that's, I think, important.
that's lovely. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, nice to see you, Annette.
Hi, Lisa. This is Holly up in the corner.
Hi there.
I wondered how. I'm thinking of Mr. Rogers.
Oh.
And how he's saying be a helper and everything. How do you get past the feeling of that you can't do enough? that, sometimes I feel like I should be doing more, but I don't know how to do that. And I'm afraid if I got to the next stage, then I still feel like I have to do more. How do you get past the guilt of not being able to do more?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I think one of the things when I can talk as a physician, which is basically we're never doing enough. I mean, a lot of folks that I work with are like, we're just not doing enough. It's like, but let's step back now and look at what we're actually doing. There's usually one thing that we've done for each patient, that has been helpful, and try to find that one thing. So I think the thing is, we just sort of think about it and we think, what can I do? And we do our best. And it's not up to any of us individually to change things, but through everybody doing small things, I think we can work on it. I have to say, I agree that some of the things seem just overwhelming and very daunting. And I don't know how the future is going to unfold, especially with climate change and different things, but we can try to do our part. At least we know we tried, and at least we know we did something, and then do something, see it clearly, don't do it something for me, like say, gosh, I'm such a great person. Look at me doing this. Oh, I'm so wonderful. Which, I think all of us maybe at some point in our lives are like, yeah, look at me, like I'm doing this great thing. And then it's kind of like, you're like, oh, shut up and just like do the thing and try to help and not get your ego in there. It's like the concept of these, I see all these folks who study Buddhism sort of quietly doing good things all around the country, and Buddhists are not Buddhists, but you don't hear about those folks. You don't hear about the folks quietly going about doing things, and I think that's the only way we can. It kind of gets into the guilt idea too. Like, I should be able to solve climate change or something, which is like, I think we can look back and say, well, gosh, I should have not been doing that in the past, but now moving forward, I'm going to try to do better. And that's, I think, the best that we can do. I'm also open if other folks have thoughts about it too.
Yeah, and just I'm trying not to buy stuff that's in plastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just...
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, making those changes in your personal life and trying not to cause harm. I think it's really important. So good for you not buying plastic. I have not quite gotten there. It seems like the culture and the everything is like conspires against us, doesn't it? It's like every freaking thing is in plastic, so anyway, yeah. Thank you for that thought. Yeah.
I guess I would like just to point out that Holly is someone who is doing multiple things. She's at the food bank and encouraging others to come to the food bank. There's this group she's been doing online work for a giving outfit for years. She helps at the Zendo. She was working on the bamboo recently. So, and yet it never is enough. But I want to say, yes, because we're small and can only do small things. But I just wanted to point out that you are actually doing quite a few of those small things besides not buying plastic. So Thank you.
Right. And I'll say, like, I was on the palliative team I was on before my current one, where I've been for a while. But I just remember one of the nurse. I mean, we're like going in and we're trying, palliative care. You try to help alleviate suffering for people with serious illness, and I still remember this nurse practitioner who was fabulous. Like she was like the best person healing. Just her presence, everything was, and just breaking down, sobbing, like, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. And I was like, Ruth, like, look at all the things you did today. I mean, this is like the cup half full or half empty. It's like, you can only do so much. And everything you did for these patients was really, really important, like this and this and this and this and this. So it's you know, kind of shifting one's focus to say, you know, do you see, you know, global warming all of a sudden change because of it? No, but you just have to have faith that these small things are making a difference, I think. So thank you for all your good work, because I think that's really important.
Hi, I'm Roberta.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yep.
Oh, good. Thank you. I really enjoy your story of the poor woman who lost so much. That sort of woke me up too. I do have times when there are difficulties within my family, and I'm learning something very important, which is doing small things. And rather than being stuck in my story about what's going on, I'm actually have created a practice for myself of doing one small thing to help someone else each week or each day, even sometimes. Yeah. And that included recently working with a mentally challenged person who lives in my community. She got a car and she hasn't driven for years, and she really wanted just me to go to the beach with her. And I was scared to go with her because is she capable of driving this car? I had all these concerns. And then I thought, finally, something just came through me, just give it up. And if it's a problem, stop the car and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I went with her. We had a lovely time. She has difficulty walking, and she really likes that I encouraged her to walk the beach and to enjoy it. And it just made such a difference. And it brings up tears right now because I really made a difference for her. And she made a difference for me. Yeah. I don't drive. I got to go to the beach. So it's in the small things that we actually, I agree with you so much. Yeah. And I love the Mr. Rogers quote, because that's where it's at. And I'm starting to write letters for people who can't write anymore, compose loving letters to their relatives or whoever in their life as a practice. Yeah. So just finding things that you can do that help someone else, that helps your own suffering. Yeah.
I'm moving because my internet connection is unstable. So I'm gonna try to keep, but I think that's really beautiful. And I think you brought up something that is extremely important too, which is that through helping others, we actually help ourselves. You know, it's a relationship, right? The whole giver, receiver, and gift thing. It's like, it's one. And so, yeah, that's really beautiful. And those are wonderful ways to be, you know, sort of benefit. You know, you're like really specific, like I see this need, I'm going to try to help with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
The best day she's had in a long time. Maybe you too.
Thank you. Bless you.
Oh yeah. Thank you. That's very sweet. Yeah.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you for your talk.
Hey. Hi, Jude.
Hi. Thank you. In your talk, the notion of rebirth was really critical in Buddha's comforting of Patakara. And the whole notion of multiple lives and offered her immediate comfort. And I want to know what your thoughts are on that concept.
Yeah.
Our Sangha quite a bit. It's quite individualistic. So what are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I recognize that, you know, sort of, and to be honest, I don't know. I don't know if that, you know, I guess I personally come down to feeling like the wheel of life and the different realms that people can be in. I mean, I know like every day I'm in each of those realms, you know, like, okay, here I am getting angry. I'm in the hell realm. And here I am like, oh gosh, I'd love to have that new iPhone. And I'm in the hungry ghost realm. You know, it's sort of like a constant thing. And I'm going to actually just go back to what my teacher has said. Like, I don't know. Like you know, what happens when we die? It's like, I've never been there. I'm not quite sure, you know? So I think different people have different thoughts about it. And all are valid, you know. I guess I keep thinking about it, you know, because you know, working with dying people so much, I wonder about that. And but I guess I'm an agnostic. I don't know. I'm not really sure. And I'd love to, you know, I'll tell you a funny story. So, you know, as a palliative care doctor, right? People think you know stuff, like you've got the inside scoop, you know, on things or what happens. And once I was going to give a talk, and I called it the top 10 myths of end of life care. So end of life care, meaning like, you know, opioids, if you use them right, don't hasten death, and you know, all this other stuff. But when they put the announcement out, it was the top 10 myths about end of life, right? And so like I had all these people coming up to me in the hall saying, I'm really curious what you're going to talk about. Like, this is going to be really important. So when I went into the hall, and there were like 100 people in a hall that sat 70 people, right? They were on the standing, they're on the steps. I mean, everyone. And I was like, I don't have any great insight to this. The talk was supposed to be about end of life care, and I can talk about that. And I still remember that, thinking like, you know, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'll just say I don't know. And yeah, I don't know.
A good answer.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I wish I knew. Well, no, I don't. You know, it's kind of, the mystery is kind of cool, you know? Like, you know, you're not doing stuff just to kind of get into a better rebirth. You're just doing it to, you know, because it seems like the right thing to do. And don't think about it. You know, I don't think about it that much. I really don't know. I know with watching people at end of life and being with families and being with my own family members, I've sometimes seen things where I was like, you know, something's going on here, you know, when people see their ancestors, when people see their, you know, family members that they've loved in the room and things, it's like, you know, I don't know. It's really a mystery, really a mystery. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Lisa, John Martin.
Sorry, John, Bob has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to do a hand
Can we
thing.
just do that just because he was there, and then you're after?
It's hard to see all the different.
It's hard to see everybody. Yeah. You're Bob and then John.
Okay. With Patakara, with that story, you know, it's the things that happen to her are external circumstances. The hawk takes her baby, her son drowns, her family's house burns down. So these are external events that cause her suffering. But it seems to me what's more difficult is when you are the author of your own suffering. You know, Joseph Goldstein says in one of his books that some people are so attached to their own suffering that they can't even think of themselves apart from that suffering.
Right.
And you know, they can not only make themselves miserable, but others around them.
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on that, or reflections on that?
I guess a few. You know, I think one of the things about Patakara is she blamed herself because she was the one trying to get back to her parents, and her husband said no. And when her husband died, she felt guilty, like he would not have been here. I think a lot of it was like tied up to, if I hadn't been so persistent wanting this thing, you know, others would have survived. So I think there's that little element of it. And guilt, you know, and a guilt about it. And guilt can become who you are, you know, and your modus operandi, you know. It can be, this is who I am, or, you know, and I know that, like Tomon always says, you know, guilt is a kind of a selfish emotion in a way. It's about me, right? Like, oh my God, I did this and I'm so terrible. And we can swirl in it. But a more helpful emotion may be regret. I screwed up, I regret it, and now I'm going to try to do better. It kind of pushes you forward out of the swirl. And I know folks, and perhaps myself too, who've been so consumed with their identity as a suffering person. It can sometimes be hard to see beyond that, and yet that may be the best that they can do. I think that's another thought as well. But I think I really loved, with the precepts, the 10 precepts, which are not, they're not the 10 sins or the 10 commandments. It's like you're aspiring constantly to get up to meet those. And now I am not there, right? I mean, like I know, like, I'm like, oh geez, there I broke. Yeah, I said something this morning and my husband said, you broke about 5 precepts in that one sentence, so, and it's like, okay, but I regret it, I didn't, okay. And now I'm going to try to do better. And I think that concept, it's not a guilt, it's not a sin. You screwed up and now try to get back on the path. And I think that can really help folks. It helped me, just because I'm a great, we grew up with a lot of guilt in our family about everything. And it's sort of like, you're just like, you should have done this in 1970, whatever. It's like, okay, but I didn't, and I'm trying better now, so it's hard though. It's hard. And sometimes you need a good friend to say to you, let's try to move ahead here, or maybe get out of that swirl that one is in. Yeah, but it's hard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
John, please go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm going to pass because I think my question was similar to what Robert was talking about.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask something. This is Mary Ann.
Hello.
Hi. That story of Patakara, one of the really profound places is she comes in, she's nuts, right? And she's naked. And the Buddha just says, sit down here. For me, that's just so profound. I find just that act right there, such a profound teaching for the moments when I certainly feel so overwhelmed, maybe my own griefs or others I've ingested. Sometimes, just sit down with the Buddha. And I wonder, how do you experience that in your work as a palliative care doctor? And, sometimes it just gets overwhelming. How do you do that? Just sit down, or what do you call to?
Yeah, no, that's a really good insight. And I like that. Sit down with the Buddha when you're overwhelmed. I mean, I think it has a lot of kind of ripples out. I think that the concept of just stopping and being present is a lot of times what people need. They don't need you to do something. The joke in palliative care is, everyone usually says, don't just stand there, do something, and that's what we do in medicine really well, is like keep doing things. And we say in palliative care, don't just do something, stand there, like just be present and listen to people. And I learned early on in my training how important that was, because I felt like, well, I'm not doing anything, I'm just like sitting here. And I'll tell a quick story. I hope if we have time, but a quick story where I was a fellow in palliative medicine, and I had a patient who was extremely angry, justifiably, because his diagnosis had been missed. And then finally, by the time it came, he had metastatic cancer and you couldn't cure it. And every time I'd go in to see him, it would be this sort of barrage of anger, anger, and his family. And it was just really hard. So I was on call on a Saturday, and I saved him to the end because I thought I can't do that right in the beginning of the day. So at the end of, all going through all the patients, and I go to see him, and I walk in and I'm like, got my iron underwear on in a sense of like, okay, what am I going to get here? And he's sobbing on the bed with his fiance, his girlfriend of like 14 years. And she's holding his hand and he's wailing. I never did this in my life. I didn't get a chance to do that in my life. I didn't marry her. I didn't do these things. And like, I didn't know what to do. And I just sat down on the other side and held the other hand. Right. Yeah. And I kept thinking, man, I suck, because like, there's gotta be something to say right now. Like, I know all my teachers who are so smart, they'd have the perfect words here, and I don't know what to say. So I'm just going to sit here. So I sat there, and eventually the conversation, as it went on and on, it came back to, he's saying, I don't even know when this test is for today. I don't know anything. And I thought, oh, good, I can figure that out. So I was like, okay, wait here. And like, I run out to the nurse's station. I was like, when is his endoscopy? And they're like, it's at 1. I was like, thanks. So like, I run back in, like all proud that I have an answer for something. And the whole room had changed. He wasn't crying. He was smiling. He's holding his girlfriend's hand. He looked at me and I said, it's 1 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock. And he goes, it wasn't that. He just says, before I even got to that, he's like, thank you so much. You really helped me today. By that, just being present and not running away and just listening. And so I think, I think that idea is really key. Like, we're not just sort of hanging at the bedside being nosy or whatever. We're doing something by sometimes, by listening and being present and seeing that person. The founder of hospice said, you are you, and therefore you matter. Like you're an individual, and I'm going to do what I can for you. So that, I guess that's kind of, I hope that is helpful. Yeah. Anyway,
Thank you.
being present. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Thank you, Tomon. That it was
Oh,
lovely.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's Keiko.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if you're up for it, I think we have time for one more. Keiko,
Okay.
did you?
Yeah.
You're up for it.
Hi.
Yeah.
It's Keiko.
Hi, Keiko.
So I just wanted to say hi because I moved here a couple of years ago from Corrales, New Mexico.
Oh.
And used to sit there with a Rinzai group headed by Michael Hedderly, who actually worked at UNM. Do you know him?
Yeah, oh yeah. I
Great.
love him.
But I also wanted to say that I recently lost my mother, and she was in hospice. And I was just so struck by the difference, because it was one day she was in a hospital and the next day she was in hospice, and the difference, the attitude and in the care and palliative care, and how they suddenly, like the palliative nurses were like, they saw her and it was all about her. And with the other, a lot of times with the medical community, it feels like the patient is in the way. It's just in the way of like what we need, which is the cure. We just get out of the way. And they really, it was just so touching. And I felt like it just did so much more immense good than whatever they were trying to do to save her. So.
First off, I'm sorry about your loss, but I'm glad the experience was good with the hospice. And let's just be honest, medical care in our country is broken.
Yeah.
And, hospice and palliative care are sort of these ways to get back to, holistic care. It's about the person. It's not the disease. It's the illness that person is going through. Disease and illness aren't the same thing, right? So you could have 1,000 people with the same disease, their scan looks the same, but their illness is the experience and how they're dealing with it and what they need. And it's always unique. And I feel fortunate to have found palliative care. I don't think I would be doing medical care at this point if I had not found it, because it was so hard doing primary care, hospital work, where you're just sort of like one, 15 minutes to see someone, you can't talk with them, you don't get to know them. And so, yeah, it's and I often talk about how our medical system is set up. It's to make profit in a way. Here I'm getting maybe a little political, but if we had a system right now that was to take the best care of the people, the most cost efficient, et cetera, versus one that works on trying to make profit, I think we'd have two very different healthcare systems. So, and I think I know myself and my husband and my mother and my dad, we've all gotten caught up in those systems where we sort of say, wait a minute, what's going on? It's sort of one test after the other. And I often call it a thousand correct decisions. Like you keep doing this test and that procedure and this procedure, and you end up like a place you totally would not want to be. And no one ever told you there's an off ramp, so, so yeah, but I'm glad it was a good experience. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tomon. Wonderful to have your engagement. Glad that, and thank you that the gift of a relatively short talk, so lots of time for interacting with the Sangha was such a great gift this morning.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thanks, Tonin, for coming.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
And thanks, Auntie G's show. So anyway, and nice to see you again, Charlie and Sarah.
It's good to see you. And we'll put the closing chant is in the chat. We'll do that to finish together.
Okay.
For great bodhisattva vows,
beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless, I vow to realize it.